In African spirituality, words are not cheap. They are life and death. Every syllable carries weight. Every vow is a cord that binds. Every declaration can ripple through the realms of the living and the dead. To speak carelessly is dangerous, but to swear falsely is fatal. For in these traditions, an oath is never just a promise between two people. It is a sacred spiritual contract. It is a binding covenant made not only before witnesses of flesh and blood, but also before ancestors, deities, and unseen forces that enforce order in the cosmos. To swear is to sign your name in spirit, and once that ink is set, there is no erasing. An oath, in its essence, is a declaration sealed with power. Unlike modern promises that may be broken with little more than disappointment, these ancient oaths are spiritual signatures carved into destiny itself. They are not symbolic gestures, but binding codes, invocations that summon forces beyond the human to stand as judges and executioners if the vow is betrayed. The oath transforms words into weapons, into contracts written on the soul. To break such a vow is not only dishonorable, it is lethal. What then makes these oaths unbreakable? Why have generations feared their consequences so deeply that even whispers of them evoke awe and terror? The answer lies in the belief that no human being alone enforces an oath. When one swears by the Ofo among the Igbo, or by the ancestors in Akan tradition, or before the shrine of Ogun in Yoruba practice, the vow is transferred from human hands into divine custody. It is no longer a personal promise, but a sacred covenant that the spiritual realm itself will uphold. To lie under such an oath is to place your life in the balance and dare the unseen to strike. And according to tradition, the unseen never forgets. In this journey, we will walk through 9 of the most powerful and feared oaths in African spirituality. Oaths that reveal the weight of truth, the sanctity of blood, the authority of ancestors, and the deadly consequences of betrayal. We will uncover the oath of truth, where the staff of Ofo calls down divine justice. We will witness the blood oath, binding lives together in ways no betrayal can escape. We will examine the ancestral oath, where the spirits of the departed stand guard over promises made. We will explore the marriage oath, the priesthood oath, and the oath of secrecy that guards the mysteries of sacred societies. We will step into the warrior's oath, where loyalty is sealed with spirit, and the oath of office where kings and leaders are held accountable by divine law. And finally, we will face the death oath, the most extreme of all, a vow sealed with life itself. These are not mere stories. They are codes that once shaped civilizations, governed justice, and kept balance in societies where the invisible was just as real as the visible. To break them was to summon ruin, to invoke sickness, madness, disgrace, or even sudden death. To honor them was to live under the gaze of gods and ancestors, bound by promises that outlived flesh. This is the world of the unbreakable oath, and the deadly consequences it carries. Among the Igbo people of Nigeria, truth is not just a moral choice, it is a cosmic force. To speak truth is to align with the very order of the universe, and to lie under oath is to set yourself against that order. Nowhere is this more clearly embodied than in the oath of truth, known as Ofor na Ogu. This is not a casual vow taken lightly. It is a covenant sworn with the sacred staff called Ofor, an object that represents justice, ancestral authority, and divine alignment. To hold the Ofor is to call upon the unseen as witness. To speak falsely while invoking it is to sign your own spiritual death warrant. The Ofor itself is more than a piece of wood. It is a consecrated staff, often cut from sacred trees and carried by elders, priests, and those entrusted with the moral order of the community. The Ofor embodies ancestral power, the living presence of those who came before. And to invoke it is to invite their judgment. In moments of dispute, when a person is accused of wrongdoing and denies the charge, they may be asked to swear upon the oath. If they are guilty, tradition teaches that the ancestors will not be deceived. The punishment is certain. Sickness that resists healing, madness that unsettles the mind, or sudden death that strikes without warning. The guilty may walk away from the oath unscathed at first, but the Igbo believe that divine justice cannot be outrun. Truth always finds its way back. This oath reflects a worldview where truth is not simply a human virtue, but a law of nature, as binding as gravity. To disrupt it is to destabilize existence itself. The Igbo say that Ogu abugi ihe ana ere ahiya, truth is not for sale in the market. It cannot be bent by wealth, influence, or deceit. Ofona Ogu ensures that truth prevails, not by human enforcement alone, but by spiritual intervention. It is an oath that equalizes all because even the most powerful cannot bribe the ancestors or manipulate the gods. Stories circulate in Igbo communities of men who swore falsely on the Ofor, only to waste away mysteriously within weeks. Others became mentally unstable, muttering incoherent words as though the very weight of their deception broke their minds. In some cases, entire lineages suffered the curse, with children and grandchildren facing misfortunes believed to be the echo of an oath broken generations earlier. This is why the Ofor is revered with such seriousness. It does not only affect the individual, but the entire bloodline connected to them. But the oath of truth is not merely a tool for punishment. It is also a shield for the innocent. To swear upon the Ofor when one is blameless is to place oneself under divine protection. No curse, no false accusation, no malice can stand against someone who has sworn truthfully by Ofor. In this way, Ofor na Ogu functions as both sword and shelter, punishing liars and protecting the righteous. It affirms the moral geometry of the cosmos, that truth is not fragile but unbreakable, and that lies carry within them the seed of destruction. In modern contexts, some might see such practices as symbolic, but for the Igbo, symbolism is never empty. To touch the Ofor is to touch power. To call its name is to call judgment. Even today, in disputes over land, inheritance, or betrayal, elders may suggest an oath upon Ofor when all other negotiations fail. The fear it inspires is enough to silence the guilty and vindicate the innocent. Because deep down, everyone knows that truth has witnesses beyond human eyes, and those witnesses are merciless when called upon. The oath of truth stands as one of the most unbreakable vows in African spirituality because it is more than a contract between people. It is a covenant with reality itself. To honor it is to stand in harmony with the divine order. To break it is to invite chaos, sickness, and death. And in this law, there is no escape. The ancestors see, the spirits hear, the Ofor remembers. Blood is more than fluid. It is essence, identity, and the deepest bond between spirit and flesh. Across West Africa, the blood oath is regarded as one of the most binding and dangerous covenants a person can ever make. Unlike an ordinary promise, the blood oath calls upon life itself as witness. To swear by blood is to tie your destiny irreversibly to another. To break that vow is to invite catastrophe, not only upon yourself, but upon your descendants yet unborn. The blood oath is sacred, feared, and rarely invoked, for everyone knows that betrayal carries consequences too heavy to bear. In many African traditions, blood is not just biological, it is spiritual substance, the carrier of lineage, memory, and ancestral presence. To shed blood carelessly is to risk angering the spirits. To use blood in covenant is to write a contract in the deepest ink the body can produce. Among the Yoruba people of Nigeria, blood oaths have historically been used to seal pacts of loyalty, secrecy, or brotherhood.
Two individuals might cut their palms and let their blood mingle, declaring themselves bound as kin forever. They may swear before Ogun, the Orisha of iron and war, who punishes dishonor with swift justice. By invoking blood and Ogun together, the oath becomes unbreakable. To betray it is to invite Ogun's wrath, accidents, injuries, or violent deaths believed to be orchestrated by his iron hand. Among the Akan people of Ghana, blood oaths have been part of royal and communal life. A subject swearing loyalty to a chief may seal it with blood, marking themselves as eternally tied to the throne. Friends may cut themselves and mix blood, creating what is often called blood brotherhood, a bond stronger than kinship. In some Akan tales, those who betrayed such a pact fell ill inexplicably, their bodies deteriorating as though life itself had turned against them. In the worldview of the Akan, the blood oath was not symbolic, but literal. To tie blood is to tie souls, and betrayal is not just social treason, but cosmic disruption. What makes the blood oath so feared is the belief that its consequences do not end with the oath taker. If one breaks it, the curse spreads through their lineage. A man who swore loyalty but later betrayed his oath may not only suffer illness or misfortune, but may also pass that stain down to his children and grandchildren. Generations might endure poverty, barrenness, or repeated tragedy, all traced back to a broken blood oath. This idea reflects a larger principle in African spirituality. Actions echo. They do not die with the doer, but reverberate through the family, community, and ancestral continuum. Because of this, blood oaths were used sparingly, reserved for matters of life and death, loyalty and betrayal. In Yoruba tradition, one might take a blood oath when joining a secret society, binding themselves to its secrecy under penalty of death. In Akan tradition, a blood oath might seal political alliances, ensuring loyalty in times of war. Among hunters or warriors, blood oaths bound men into brotherhoods, where betrayal could mean not only defeat in battle but spiritual disgrace. These covenants were deadly serious, and those who took them knew they were wagering not only their own lives, but the fate of their descendants. There are countless stories across West Africa of those who underestimated the blood oath. Oral traditions tell of men who swore loyalty in youth, but betrayed it in greed or anger. Soon after, they found themselves plagued by misfortunes too uncanny to be coincidence. Crops failed, children died young, madness descended. Entire households collapsed under the invisible weight of the broken covenant. Villagers whispered of blood crying out for vengeance, of ancestors demanding repayment for promises betrayed. In some cases, the only remedy was an elaborate cleansing ritual involving sacrifice, confession, and reparation. And even then, the fear lingered that the blood had already spoken too loudly to be silenced. The blood oath also functioned as a deterrent. In societies where formal courts and prisons were limited, the fear of spiritual consequences maintained order. A man might hesitate to betray a brother, not because of human law, but because of divine enforcement. The oath stood as a reminder that there are contracts no human court can dissolve, no bribe can erase, no denial can undo. Once the blood touches, the covenant is sealed.
Ultimately, the blood oath demonstrates how African spirituality intertwines the physical with the metaphysical. Blood is not merely a bodily substance. It is life, essence, truth. To mingle it is to weave destinies together. To betray it is to untangle the fabric of existence with devastating consequences. The Yoruba and Akan, like many others across West Africa, understood that some promises are too sacred to break. And so, they warned, enter into a blood oath only if you are prepared to uphold it until death. For if you betray it, death itself may come searching, and it will not stop at you. It will follow your name. It will follow your blood. It will follow your line. To swear by the ancestors is to call eternity as your witness. In African spirituality, the living are never isolated beings. They are links in a chain that stretches back into the unseen and forward into the yet unborn. The Ancestral Oath draws upon this sacred continuum, binding a person not just to their word, but to the authority of all who came before them. When someone swears by the ancestors, they are invoking the most intimate and terrifying of witnesses, their own bloodline, their own lineage, those who carried them into existence. And once the ancestors are called, they do not forget. They do not forgive betrayal easily. The ritual act of invoking the ancestors in oath often begins with libation. In many traditions across Africa, libation is the pouring of water, palm wine, or gin onto the earth while calling the names of departed elders. This is not a casual act. It is both an offering and a summons, a way of reminding the spirits that they are remembered, honored, and invited into the present moment. To pour libation and then speak on oath is to say, "As I stand here, I place my words under your eternal gaze." The earth drinks the liquid, the ancestors receive the invocation, and the vow is sealed in realms beyond human reach. Among the Igbo, the Akan, and the Congo peoples, the Ancestral Oath is one of the most binding of all. Unlike oaths sworn by objects or deities, the Ancestral Oath is deeply personal. It summons not a distant god, but one's own bloodline to stand guard over the promise. To break it is to betray not only your word, but the very people whose sacrifices allowed you to live. The consequences of such betrayal are said to be swift and merciless. Ancestral wrath does not always arrive with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, eroding the life of the offender piece by piece. Stories abound of those who broke ancestral oaths and found themselves haunted by strange misfortunes. Some reported hearing voices in the night, whispers that robbed them of peace. Others spoke of dreams where angry ancestors appeared, demanding restitution. In extreme cases, individuals who betrayed such vows were struck with barrenness, unable to bear children, a punishment both practical and symbolic. To cut off the bloodline of an oath breaker is to mirror the betrayal they enacted, to end their lineage just as they disrespected those who came before. In other accounts, sickness or madness followed, illnesses that no healer could cure until confession and reconciliation rituals were performed. The fear of ancestral wrath served as a powerful social regulator. In communities where written contracts were rare, the invocation of ancestors was more binding than any legal document. A man who swore loyalty before his ancestors knew that he was taking not just his own life, but his family's honor and future. If he betrayed that vow, he risked bringing shame and suffering upon his entire lineage. In this way, ancestral oaths were not only spiritual acts, but instruments of justice, ensuring that promises were kept and truth maintained. But the ancestral oath is not only about fear, it is also about protection. To swear truthfully before the ancestors is to place oneself under their guardianship. Those who honor their vows often report feeling shielded, blessed, and guided. The ancestors, having been acknowledged and respected, walk with the oath keeper, ensuring that their path is steady and their name remains untarnished. In this sense, the ancestral oath is both a sword and a shelter, punishing betrayal but rewarding integrity with divine favor. In modern times, libation continues to play a central role in African spiritual and cultural life. Whether at weddings, funerals, political gatherings, or moments of conflict resolution, pouring to the ancestors remains a way of anchoring words in sacred authority. Even those who no longer live by traditional laws still hesitate before invoking the ancestors lightly. The memory of their power lingers, and with it, the understanding that some witnesses never die.
The Ancestral Oath stands as a reminder that promises are not merely human contracts, but threads woven into the fabric of existence. To honor such an oath is to keep harmony with the continuum of life. To break it is to unleash forces that do not rest until balance is restored. The ancestors do not forget. They do not sleep. And when you call them into your vow, you invite them to become judges, not for a moment, but for eternity.
Marriage in African spirituality is not merely a union of two individuals bound by affection or romance. It is a covenant, a sacred alliance that ties families, lineages, and even ancestors together in a web of spiritual responsibility. The marriage oath, at its core, is a vow made not only between husband and wife, but also before the ancestors and the divine order that governs society. This oath is treated with the utmost seriousness because it does not simply affirm love. It creates a spiritual contract that reshapes destinies, merges bloodlines, and ensures the continuity of life itself. In many African traditions, the marriage ceremony is far more than celebration. It is a ritual negotiation between two families and two lineages, anchored by spiritual witnesses. When a man and woman exchange vows, their words are accompanied by libations, sacrifices, blessings, and invocations of the ancestors. Elders often remind the couple that their union is not theirs alone. It belongs to the community and is overseen by forces greater than themselves. Marriage, then, becomes a covenant of cosmic importance. To betray it is to betray not just a spouse, but the ancestors who blessed it and the spirits who uphold it. The seriousness of the marriage oath is reflected in the belief that breaking it invites severe spiritual consequences. In traditional Igbo and Akan societies, infidelity was not only a breach of trust, but a spiritual offense. To violate marital vows was to desecrate the covenant, calling down ancestral punishment. Stories are told of men who took mistresses in secret only to fall ill inexplicably, their health declining until they confessed their betrayal. Women too who broke the sanctity of marriage were said to face barrenness or misfortune, as though the womb itself closed in protest against broken promises. In some cases, entire households suffered, children sickened, businesses collapsed, harvests failed, all traced back to the rupture of a marital oath. The wrath of the ancestors is especially feared in cases of broken marriage oaths because marriage is seen as a pillar of social order. The ancestors who sacrificed to maintain harmony in life are believed to protect the integrity of the family system. When the system is threatened by betrayal, they act to restore balance, often harshly. Hauntings, nightmares, and unexplained tragedies are described as the ancestors' way of forcing confession and reconciliation. A husband who betrays his wife or a wife who betrays her husband does not suffer alone. The entire lineage is placed under scrutiny, for marriage is never about two, it is about all who stand behind them. To address such ruptures, many traditions developed spiritual divorce rituals. These ceremonies were not designed to celebrate separation, but to cleanse the spiritual stain left by a broken oath. Among the Yoruba, for example, a couple ending their union might undergo a ritual before Ogun or other deities, returning exchanged items, reversing prayers, and symbolically cutting the spiritual ties between them. Without this ritual, it was believed that the bond remained active in the unseen world, causing misfortune even if the couple physically parted. The ritual was a way of telling the universe, this covenant is dissolved, balance is restored, let no curse linger. In other societies, spiritual divorce involved sacrifices to the ancestors, asking for forgiveness and protection. A woman leaving a marriage might return bride wealth items to her husband's family, accompanied by libations poured to her forebears to declare her release. This ensured that the ancestral spirits would not interpret her departure as rebellion, but as a necessary act within divine order. Even in parting, respect for the spiritual contract was essential, because one could not simply walk away from a vow sealed before the unseen. The marriage oath also highlights the profound difference between Western ideas of love as personal and African traditions that see marriage as communal and spiritual. While romance may initiate the bond, it is the vow, spoken, witnessed, and spiritually sealed, that sustains it. Marriage is not just about affection, but about accountability. To spouse, to family, to ancestors, to the unborn who will emerge from the union. To live within the marriage oath is to walk carefully, knowing that every promise is being monitored by invisible eyes. To break it is to risk the wrath of those who watch over the family from the other side. Yet when honored, the oath is also a source of immense blessing. Couples who remain faithful to their covenant are believed to draw ancestral favor, prosperity, fertility, and protection.
The marriage becomes not just a partnership but a fortress, guarded by forces beyond the human realm. Ultimately, the marriage oath reveals that love in African spirituality is not fleeting emotion but enduring covenant. It is a vow that shapes fate, binds spirits, and extends into eternity. To betray it is to awaken ancestral judgment. To cleanse it requires ritual humility. And to honor it is to stand in harmony with the divine order of life itself.
To take on the mantle of priesthood in African spirituality is to enter into one of the most sacred contracts known to humanity. Unlike ordinary oaths, which bind one person to another, the priesthood oath binds an individual to the divine itself. Priests, diviners, and healers do not simply agree to serve their communities. They swear loyalty to the gods, the spirits, and the ancestors who empowered them. This oath is not entered casually, for once it is taken, it marks a life forever. To betray it is to risk madness, illness, or direct spiritual attack. For in the spiritual universe of Africa, betrayal of divine service is not just a personal failing, it is cosmic treason. In Yoruba tradition, the initiation of a priest or priestess involves complex rituals where vows are sworn before the Orisha, the deities who govern different aspects of life and creation. A Babalawo, priest of Ifa, for example, pledges himself to Orunmila, the Orisha of wisdom and divination. This oath means his life no longer belongs to him alone. It is dedicated to interpreting the will of Orunmili and serving those who seek divine guidance. To betray that oath, whether through dishonesty, exploitation, or abandonment of duty, is to risk Orunmila's wrath. Such betrayal is believed to result in confusion of mind, loss of spiritual power, or a slow decline into illness that no healer can reverse. The very forces that once empowered the priest become the instruments of judgment. Among the Igbo, the Dibia, spiritual healers, and diviners undergo their own form of sacred oath. During initiation, the Dibia acknowledges the spirits who will guide their work, promising never to misuse the knowledge or powers bestowed upon them. A Dibia who manipulates sacred knowledge for greed or malice is believed to invite catastrophic consequences. The ancestors offended by such betrayal may withdraw their protection, leaving the Dibia vulnerable to sickness, haunting, or insanity. Oral traditions recount stories of Dibias who broke their vows and were tormented by the very spirits they once commanded, their lives unraveling until death released them from torment. In Congo traditions, priests and Ngangas, spiritual specialists, swear loyalty to both ancestral spirits and Minkisi, sacred vessels that embody spiritual power. These vows require strict adherence to rituals of purity, honesty, and service. To misuse Minkisi or to betray the covenant made at initiation is to invite violent spiritual backlash. Some accounts speak of Ngangas who grew physically deformed or mentally unstable after betraying the oath, their bodies reflecting the disorder they had introduced into the spiritual realm. The community interpreted such conditions not as random misfortune but as divine punishment for betrayal of sacred trust. The common thread in these traditions is that priesthood is not a career, it is a covenant. Once chosen and initiated, the priest becomes a servant of both the divine and the community. They are bound by oaths that demand integrity, humility, and discipline. They are entrusted with secrets, rituals, and powers that can heal or destroy, and the oath ensures these powers are not wielded irresponsibly. Betrayal of this oath is thus doubly dangerous. It damages the community and desecrates the relationship between human and spirit. For this reason, priesthood oaths are reinforced through continual ritual. Priests regularly renew their vows through offerings, sacrifices, and observance of taboos. A Yoruba priest, for instance, may be forbidden from eating certain foods or entering certain places as part of the covenant with the Orisha. To break such taboos is not simply personal negligence, it is oath-breaking, and the consequences are severe. The same is true for Dibias and Gangas, who are held to codes of purity and ritual conduct that mark their loyalty to the spirits they serve. The oath of priesthood stands as one of the most sacred and perilous commitments in African spirituality. It is a vow that transforms life into service and places the priest under constant spiritual scrutiny. Those who honor it are rewarded with wisdom, protection, and the trust of their communities. Those who betray it are consumed by the very powers they once wielded, their lives unraveling as a warning to others. In this way, the priesthood oath reminds us that spiritual power is not a privilege, but a responsibility. One that demands unshakable loyalty to the divine order.
Secrecy has always been the lifeblood of sacred knowledge. Across Africa, wisdom is not given freely to everyone, but entrusted to the few who have been chosen, tested, and initiated. To safeguard that wisdom, powerful oaths were created. Oaths of secrecy that bound initiates of mystery schools and secret societies to silence under the threat of deadly consequences. These oaths were never symbolic gestures. They were spiritual contracts sworn before deities, ancestors, and cosmic forces. To reveal hidden knowledge to outsiders was to violate the covenant, and the retribution was believed to be swift, merciless, and inescapable. Among the Yoruba of southwestern Nigeria, the Ogboni society represents one of the most influential guardians of sacred knowledge. Ogboni members, often elders and community leaders, swore oaths of secrecy that ensured the society's rituals, symbols, and sacred teachings remained hidden from the uninitiated. These oaths were taken with gravity, invoking the earth deity and the ancestors as eternal witnesses. The earth itself was believed to rise against anyone who betrayed the vow. Those who revealed Ogboni secrets risked madness, disgrace, or death. In some accounts, violators were believed to wither away mysteriously, their decline seen as evidence of spiritual forces enforcing the oath. In the Cross River region of Nigeria and Cameroon, the Ekpe society held similar authority. Ekpe, also known as Leopard Society, governed not only spiritual matters but also political and judicial life. Its members were entrusted with coded languages, masquerades, and rituals that reinforced their authority. The oaths of secrecy taken by Ekpe initiates ensured that these mysteries remained closed to outsiders. Breaking such an oath was not only betrayal of the society, but an offense against the ancestors who empowered it. The punishment for betrayal was believed to be both physical and spiritual. In some communities, violators were hunted down, while in others, ancestral retribution struck through sudden illness or unexplained misfortune. The fear of these consequences kept the society's secrets intact for centuries, even in the face of colonial intrusion. The Poro and Sande societies of West Africa, found among the Mende, Vai, and other groups in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, provide another striking example. The Poro society, reserved for men, and the Sande society, reserved for women, acted as initiatory schools where young people were taught the laws of the land, spiritual disciplines, and sacred knowledge. Initiates swore oaths of secrecy, often during elaborate rites that included symbolic acts to impress the seriousness of the covenant. To break such an oath was considered a direct affront to the spirits that governed the societies. Elders taught that violators would suffer relentless spiritual attack. Their health would fail, their mind would break, or their lives would be cut short. These stories were not idle threats but part of the lived reality of those communities, where fear of breaking the oath ensured the sanctity of the societies. What made these oaths so terrifying was that enforcement did not rest in human hands alone. It was widely believed that the spirits themselves, invoked during the initiation, would seek out and destroy oath breakers. In Yoruba Ogboni ceremonies, the earth deity Onili was called upon as the enforcer. In Ekpe traditions, the leopard spirits were said to avenge betrayal. In Poro and Sandi, ancestors and nature spirits acted as the invisible executioners. This understanding made the oaths far more powerful than ordinary laws, for no one could escape the gaze of the spirits. No distance, no exile, no denial could protect a traitor once the unseen had been summoned against them. Breaking an oath of secrecy did not only endanger the individual, it endangered their entire lineage. Communities believed that betrayal could stain a family for generations, causing recurring misfortunes, infertility, or spiritual disfavor. Thus, the oath was not only a personal burden, but a generational one. Families raised their children with the reminder that silence was survival, and loyalty to the society was loyalty to the ancestors themselves. At the same time, these oaths were not only instruments of fear, they also functioned as tools of preservation. The wisdom contained within the Ogboni, Ekpe, Poro, and Sandi societies included spiritual teachings, ethical laws, and cultural traditions that bound communities together. Secrecy was the shield that protected this wisdom from dilution, misinterpretation, or exploitation. In societies where oral knowledge carried the weight of civilization, the oath of secrecy was essential to maintaining integrity. It ensured that sacred knowledge was revealed only to those prepared to handle its power.
In essence, the oath of secrecy was both prison and protection. It safeguarded the deepest mysteries of African traditions while binding those entrusted with them to lives of careful silence. Those who honored it became carriers of wisdom, respected and feared. Those who betrayed it invited forces far greater than human wrath. Madness, illness, disgrace, or death. These were not punishments imposed by men, but by the spirits that stood behind the oath. And in African spirituality, once the spirits are called, they do not rest until justice is done. The path of a warrior in African spirituality was never only about skill with weapons or courage in battle. It was a sacred vocation, bound by vows that extended beyond human leadership into the realm of gods and ancestors. To be a warrior was to serve as a vessel of protection for one's people, to fight not merely for survival, but for the preservation of the spiritual order that sustained the community. The warrior's oath, therefore, was not an oath of convenience, but of life and soul. Warriors swore before deities, ancestors, and the unseen forces that governed existence. To betray that oath was to commit spiritual treason, a crime that carried consequences far beyond the battlefield. Among the Zulu people of Southern Africa, warriors entered into battle invoking the power of their ancestors. Before campaigns, the Izangoma, spiritual practitioners, would perform rituals that included sacrifices, ancestral invocations, and sacred chants. The warriors were reminded that they carried not only spears, but the spirits of their lineage with them. Their oath was to fight with honor, bravery, and loyalty, never to abandon their comrades or dishonor the ancestors who walked beside them. To flee from battle or betray one's regiment was not just cowardice. It was a rupture in the covenant between the warrior and the spiritual realm. Such treason was believed to strip the offender of ancestral protection, leaving them vulnerable to death, disgrace, or misfortune that would follow them long after the battle ended. This oath of loyalty and protection was not unique to the Zulu. Across the continent, warrior societies bound their members with similar vows. In Yoruba culture, warriors often swore allegiance to Ogun, the Orisha of iron and war. Ogun was both protector and destroyer, rewarding bravery but punishing betrayal with merciless precision. To swear an oath before Ogun meant staking one's life on loyalty. Any cowardice, deceit, or desertion was seen as an offense against Ogun himself. Stories tell of warriors who violated their vows only to meet grisly ends, accidents with iron tools, sudden sickness, or violent deaths attributed to Ogun's judgment. The warrior's oath was as much about protection as it was about loyalty. Warriors were charged with defending the spiritual and physical safety of their communities. Their bodies were shields, but the oath extended that protection into the unseen. It was believed that as long as warriors honored their vows, their ancestors would fight alongside them, guiding their weapons, strengthening their arms, and shielding them from death. When warriors marched into battle, they did not see themselves as alone. They were surrounded by legions of spirits who reinforced their courage. But should they betray their oath, those spirits would withdraw, leaving them naked to the blades of the enemy and the judgment of fate. The consequences of breaking the warrior's oath were severe and far-reaching. Cowardice was treated not just as failure but as defilement. A warrior who abandoned his comrades could bring spiritual contamination into his lineage. His descendants might suffer recurring illnesses, misfortunes, or dishonor, believed to be the lingering shadow of his betrayal. In some communities, rituals of cleansing were required not only for the individual but for his entire family, to restore balance and appease the ancestors angered by treachery. Without such rituals, the curse of betrayal could echo for generations. Yet the warrior's oath was also a source of strength. It instilled a sense of unity and fearlessness that went beyond physical training. Warriors swore not only to their leaders but to one another, pledging mutual loyalty sealed by the witness of the ancestors. This created bonds so strong that betrayal was unthinkable. In moments of fear, the oath reminded warriors that their honor was bigger than their fear of death. To die upholding the oath was seen as victory, for the soul would be welcomed with honor into the ancestral realm. To live dishonoring it, however, was a fate worse than death, a life of disgrace shadowed by spiritual judgment. The warrior's oath underscores the way African spirituality fused the material and spiritual realms into a single reality. War was not only a clash of weapons, but also a test of spiritual fidelity. Victory depended not only on numbers or strategy, but on the strength of the oath binding the warriors together. A faithful oath summoned ancestral armies. A broken one dismantled protection. In the end, the warrior's oath was both shield and sword. It protected the community while demanding unshakable loyalty from those who bore it. And it taught every warrior that courage was not just about facing death. It was about standing in truth truth before gods and ancestors, never betraying the covenant of protection. For the ancestors watched every battle and the gods measured every vow. To fight faithfully was to walk with them. To betray the oath was to be left to die alone, stripped of honor and cut off from the eternal lineage of warriors who came before. Leadership in African spirituality is never just a matter of politics. It is a sacred trust, a divine calling that carries with it immense responsibility. Kings, chiefs, and rulers are not merely administrators of earthly affairs, but custodians of spiritual order. Their authority rests not only on their ability to govern, but on their alignment with the ancestors, deities, and moral laws that sustain the community. This is why in many African societies, leaders were required to take an oath of office, a solemn covenant that bound them to truth, justice, and loyalty to their people. These oaths were sealed with elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and ancestral invocations, transforming leadership into a sacred contract. To betray that oath was to risk more than political downfall. It was to invite disgrace, dethronement, and even deadly spiritual attack. Among the Asante of Ghana, kingship was steeped in ritual and sacred authority. When an Asantehene king was chosen, he underwent initiation rites that involved swearing loyalty to the golden stool, the spiritual throne believed to house the soul of the Asante nation. The oath taken during this ceremony was not to the people alone, but to the ancestors who had fought and died for the kingdom's survival. The king promised to rule with justice, to protect his people, and to uphold the honor of the golden stool. Should he betray this sacred trust through tyranny, corruption, or cowardice, the belief was that the ancestors themselves would rise against him. History holds accounts of Asante kings who, after breaking their oaths, faced rebellions or inexplicable misfortunes that led to their downfall. For the Asante, leadership was not ownership of power, it was service under oath, enforced by forces both visible and invisible. The Igbo of southeastern Nigeria provide another powerful example. Leadership among the Igbo was traditionally more decentralized, with elders, titled men, and community leaders sharing authority. Yet even in this system, oaths played a critical role. An Igbo leader might be required to swear before the Ofo, the sacred staff representing truth and justice, declaring that he would govern fairly and uphold the laws of the land. To swear falsely or to misuse authority was to invite the wrath of Ofo na Ogu, truth and innocence as cosmic forces. Leaders who betrayed their vows often suffered disgrace, illness, or sudden death, interpreted by the community as spiritual judgment. In some cases, the people themselves dethroned leaders who broke their oaths, believing that their corruption threatened the balance of the entire community. The oath of office in African traditions was more than ceremony. It was a shield of legitimacy. As long as leaders remained faithful to their vows, they enjoyed not only the loyalty of the people, but also the protection of the ancestors and deities. Their reigns were marked by prosperity, stability, and respect. But once they broke their oath, their power became hollow. Without spiritual backing, even the most powerful ruler could be toppled with shocking speed. The ancestors, it was believed, would strip away protection, leaving the leader vulnerable to rebellion, betrayal, or sudden catastrophe. Breaking the oath of office was not only a personal failing, but a cosmic offense. It was seen as spiritual treason, a violation of the sacred contract that bound the ruler to both the people and the divine. The punishment often extended beyond the leader himself, staining his family and lineage. Descendants of oath-breaking leaders sometimes carried the reputations of shame, their names spoken with dishonor for generations. In this way, the oath served as both deterrent and safeguard, ensuring that rulers approached their office with humility and reverence. The rituals surrounding these oaths reinforced their seriousness. In many traditions, blood sacrifices were made, libations poured, and ancestral names invoked during the inauguration of rulers. These acts ensured that the oath was witnessed not only by the living, but by the dead and the gods. The covenant became etched into the spiritual order of the community. Leaders knew that every decision they made was being weighed not just by their people, but by forces beyond their sight. This awareness instilled both fear and accountability, reminding rulers that they were stewards, not owners of power. The oath of office also symbolized the interdependence between leader and people. The ruler's legitimacy depended on his faithfulness to his vows, while the people's loyalty depended on their trust in his integrity. This sacred balance reflected a deeper African worldview, that leadership is not domination but service, not privilege but responsibility. Power unmoored from oath and accountability was dangerous, and communities developed spiritual mechanisms to prevent its abuse.
Ultimately, the oath of office reveals the depth of African approaches to governance. It shows that politics and spirituality were never separate realms, but interconnected dimensions of life. Leadership was not simply about laws and armies, but about alignment with cosmic order. The oath transformed the rulers into moral exemplars, reminding them that their crowns were not ornaments of power, but symbols of sacred responsibility. And it warned them always that to break their oath was to invite collapse, disgrace, and judgment. For in African spirituality, no throne stands without truth, and no crown rests securely on a head that has betrayed its vow.
The death oath stands as the most extreme and terrifying of all covenants in African spirituality. It is the ultimate test of sincerity, sworn not only with words, but with one's very life placed in the balance. To take this oath is to declare before gods, ancestors, and shrines that if the promise spoken is false, death itself should claim the oath taker. It is not a metaphor or a figure of speech, but a deadly serious invocation. Those who dare to swear the death oath do so, knowing that the consequence of betrayal is not disgrace, not illness, not even exile, but sudden, inescapable death. Few willingly submit to this covenant, and when they do, it is only in matters so grave that nothing less than life itself can guarantee the truth. The form of this oath varies across cultures, but the principle remains the same. The life of the oath taker is wagered as collateral. Among the Yoruba, individuals suspected of grave offenses, theft, betrayal, murder, or false accusations might be brought before the shrine of Ogun, the Orisha of iron, war, and justice. There, in the presence of priests and community witnesses, the accused would be made to swear by Ogun, declaring their innocence with the chilling words, "If I lie, may I die." To swear before Ogun was to invite the deity's iron to bear witness, and the Yoruba believed that any deception uttered in such a vow would be met with swift and violent retribution. Broken bones, fatal accidents, or sudden illness were all seen as Ogun's answer to the betrayed oath. In Igbo culture, the death oath could be taken at a sacred grove or shrine, where the accused would kneel before the Ofo staff, the embodiment of truth and cosmic justice. To swear falsely by Ofo was to challenge the ancestors themselves, daring them to strike if deception was present. The Igbo held that no liar could survive such an oath for long. Even if death did not come immediately, the violator would waste away slowly, consumed by mysterious sickness, madness, or accidents that no healer could prevent. The community interpreted every calamity as proof that the ancestors were enforcing the covenant. Among the Akan, similar practices existed in disputes where truth could not be determined by ordinary means. An accused person might be led to a shrine where libations were poured, invocations made, and the oath pronounced. To declare innocence falsely in such a context was to seal one's own death sentence. The Akan believed that the spirits of the earth and the ancestors would rise against the liar, ensuring that their end was both certain and instructive to others. The punishment was not only about death, but about making an example, demonstrating to the community that sacred covenants are never to be taken lightly. What made the death oath especially terrifying was the speed with which its consequences were believed to manifest. Unlike other oaths, where misfortune might creep in gradually through illness, barrenness, or disgrace, the death oath was thought to strike swiftly. Many stories recount individuals who swore falsely in the morning and were dead by nightfall, their bodies twisted in pain or found lifeless under strange circumstances. Others survived only a short while, succumbing to sudden disease or accidents that defied explanation. Communities often pointed to these deaths as warnings, living reminders of the peril of swearing falsely. The fear surrounding this oath made it one of the most effective tools of justice. In cases where disputes could not be settled by evidence or testimony, the death oath forced the accused to place their very life on the line. Few were willing to risk it unless they were utterly confident in their innocence. This fear kept many from lying or attempting deceit, for everyone knew that once the oath was spoken, there was no turning back. It was believed that even silence was dangerous. To refuse the oath when accused was seen as an admission of guilt. But the death oath was not used casually. Elders and priests recognized the gravity of such a covenant and reserved it for the most serious cases: murder, treason, or accusations that threatened the stability of the entire community. To invoke death lightly was itself a form of desecration, a dangerous play with forces too powerful to be trifled with. The oath was sacred, final, and absolute, and its invocation was accompanied by rituals designed to remind all present that life itself was at stake. At its core, the death oath reflects a worldview where words are never empty and truth is upheld by cosmic law. To say, "If I lie, may I die," is not an exaggeration, but an invitation to divine judgment. It is the highest form of accountability, where the price of deceit is life itself. In African spirituality, this oath underscores the sacred power of speech, reminding us that words can build worlds or end them. It is the ultimate covenant, the deadliest promise, and the clearest example that in these traditions truth is not negotiable. It is life, and to betray it is to embrace death. An oath is not just a promise. It is a binding code written in spirit. It is a contract carved into the unseen world, witnessed by gods, ancestors, and forces far greater than human eyes. Across African spirituality, the oath stands as one of the most sacred and feared covenants, shaping communities, protecting truth, and punishing betrayal. As we close this journey into the 9 unbreakable oaths, one truth becomes clear: words once spoken in sacred space are not forgotten. They live, they breathe, and they enforce themselves. We began with the oath of truth, the Igbo's Ofo na Ogu, where the staff of justice binds words to cosmic law, punishing lies with sickness, madness, or death. From there, we entered the terrifying domain of the blood oath, where life essence itself sealed brotherhood, loyalty, or political allegiance. And betrayal cost not only the oath taker, but their descendants for generations. The ancestral oath reminded us that the dead are never silent. To invoke them is to summon eternal witnesses who enforce vows with wrath that can take the form of haunting, infertility, or inexplicable tragedy. The marriage oath revealed that love in African tradition is not merely emotional but spiritual covenant. To break it is to offend not only a spouse but the ancestors who blessed the union, and cleansing requires ritual humility. The priesthood oath showed that those chosen to serve as healers, diviners, and spiritual custodians
swear loyalty to the divine itself, and that betrayal of this service leads to collapse through madness, illness, or loss of spiritual power. We then uncovered the Oath of Secrecy, sworn in the great mystery schools and societies like Ogboni, Ekpe, Poro, and Sande. These oaths safeguarded sacred knowledge, binding initiates to silence with the threat of deadly retribution should they betray trust. The warrior's oath carried us into the battlefield, where men swore loyalty to gods, ancestors, and comrades, and where cowardice was treated as spiritual treason, punished not only with death, but with disgrace that echoed for generations. In leadership, the oath of office revealed how kings, chiefs, and rulers swore to govern under sacred law, and how betrayal of that oath led to dethronement, disgrace, and ancestral judgment. And finally, we faced the death oaths, the ultimate covenant, where the accused wagered their life itself, swearing before shrines and deities, "If I lie, may I die." It was the deadliest of all, feared for its swift and merciless consequences. Together, these 9 oaths reveal a profound truth. African spirituality understood that speech is power, and that promises made before gods and ancestors cannot be treated lightly. These covenants shaped justice, protected community, and maintained cosmic balance. They reminded every man and woman that their words were not private. They were eternal echoes carried into the realm of spirit. So as we leave this exploration, remember this: to speak is to bind, to swear is to sign your name in spirit, and to betray an oath is to unleash consequences that may outlive you. An oath is not just a promise, it is a binding code written in spirit. If this journey has awakened you to the depth and danger of sacred vows, honor it by sharing your thoughts. Comment below. Which of these oaths struck you the most, and why? Subscribe to the channel to continue uncovering the hidden laws, mysteries, and wisdom of African spirituality. Like and share this video so that more people can learn the weight of words and the power of sacred contracts. For in a world that treats promises lightly, remembering the eternal contract is itself an act of resistance and of truth.